And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here, but it's also the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute and your host. And there is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere online. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and also leave your comments underneath this video. Those actions that are completely free, and we are very appreciative of them, convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program a little bit more so that this show gets in front of more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to show your support to this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS, which stands for the Climate Realism Show. Or if you're watching right here, you can just grab your phone and scan that QR code over there. And you can help give us a little bit of money and help us bring this show to you every single week. Any support that you can give is warmly welcome, greatly appreciated, and also deductible on your taxes. So before we get going with a very big show today, we also want to thank our streaming partners, those being junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and a new streaming partner, the CO2 Coalition. So all of our allies are coming together to make this show possible, and we appreciate their work with us as well. Let's get rolling. So we have with us today our usual crew. Anthony Watts, he's a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. Dr. H. Sterling Burnett, he's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and also Linnea Lueken, research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland. And we are so happy to welcome to the show for the first time our old friend, Myron Ebell. He's semi-retired, I guess, from driving the environmental left nuts. He's a proud climate criminal, and he used to work at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And now he is chairman of the American Lands Council. And he was also, which is why we're so happy he's on the show today, he was the leader of the EPA transition team for the transition team for the Environmental Protection Agency during the first Trump administration. So there's really nobody else we could have on that could better talk about the flurry of executive orders that Donald Trump has issued when it comes to climate and energy. So welcome, everyone, especially you, Myron.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
Linnea, it's actually good to see you at all. Just before we get into the show, Linnea, you went to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. You smoked some cigars, you put on some nice clothes, and you had a really nice time. And then you got stuck because winter arrived. Well, let's just say Midwestern winter arrived into South Carolina and all across the South. And so you were stuck in D.C. a lot longer than you wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, regarding the cigars, Mark Morano was nice enough to share a pipe with me. So it was a pipe. It wasn't a cigar.
Pipe, that's right.
But,
we have photographic evidence.
Experience. Yeah.
We have photograph.
I had the most frustrating travel experience I've had in a very long time. I was supposed to fly back home Wednesday morning early. That flight got canceled, but I booked for another one, and later in the afternoon, hopefully Charleston Airport would thaw out and I'd make it home. I'm sitting at the airport. That one gets canceled. Thursday morning, I go to the airport, no, it was Wednesday that I was sitting in the airport and it got canceled. And then I went to a hotel for the night, thinking I was going to catch a flight Thursday morning. And I'm getting ready for bed at the hotel, and my Thursday morning flight gets canceled. And then I hear from United that they're not going to have flights into South Carolina until Saturday. And I
Jeez.
said, nope, I'm going home now. So I rented a car and drove. It's just an 8-hour drive. It wasn't too bad. And the roads were clear all the way until I made it to Charleston. And then as soon as I hit Charleston, went to the airport to pick up my car and drop off the rental. And it was like, I have some interesting pictures of that I probably shouldn't have taken while slowly creeping down the highway, but I just had to share the highway covered in snow because they have no snow removal whatsoever. So there's just like a pair of tire tracks going down the highway in white. And it was a very interesting time. And my house is covered in snow. So that's fun. For my tropical island paradise has been destroyed.
Oh, well, look, you lived in Northern Illinois for a long time. You just
I know, and Wyoming. So
And Wyoming.
yeah.
Just wait 10 years. Linnea won't know what snow is.
Yeah, exactly. I keep being told I'm never going to see snow again, and it's following me. I can't, this joke has been made a bunch of times, but I'm going to make it again anyway for the benefit of our audience. But I'm really pretty ticked that Trump didn't wait until after I got home before he canceled global warming. So
That's right. That's right. The all-powerful Donald Trump. And we'll get to that in a moment because one of our topics is the snow across the southern states. But having said all that, thanks, Elaine. Glad you're safe. Glad you're home. Let's start off, as we always do, with Anthony Watts's very favorite segment. That is the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. All right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. You could use some of that heat down in South Carolina right now, but it'll come eventually. It's called spring. Anyway, our first item here is from Facebook. Actually, it's from a local news report out of Wilbraham, Massachusetts, which is near Springfield. Anthony Watts had shared this with us in our group Slack here at the Heartland Institute. And there's really no need to explain anything more. If Andy just plays the video, you'll see that there was a problem with the electric school buses in Massachusetts.
At home now, and new this morning, an investigation is underway in Wilbraham to determine how multiple school buses caught fire earlier this morning. Take a look at this video. This is how the scene looked when first responders arrived at the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative Garage in Wilbraham. You're looking at about 4 to 5 buses engulfed in flames. Fortunately, no one was inside any of those buses when it happened. According to the Wilbraham Fire Department, the first reports came in a little before 2 this morning, and the flames were out before 3. A message from the school district superintendent sent out this morning says the buses that caught fire were new electric buses that have not yet been placed in service.
Well, fortunately, guys, the big yellow school bus fan, Kamala Harris, is not president, so we don't have to witness her crying on camera about this calamity. But again, you found this for us, Anthony, and yes, it's fortunate that there were no children on those buses. They were just brand new, never used electric school buses charging overnight, and poof, now they're all gone.
Yeah, well, if you're a parent and you see that, would you want to put your child on one of those damn things? I sure would not. The whole idea of an electric school bus is just it's virtue signaling. That's all this is. We're saving the planet because we're using electricity instead of, gasoline or whatever, diesel fuel. But the bottom line is that once again and again, we see these things just don't hold up. And, when they're brand new and they catch fire, I mean, what kind of warranty have they got, I wonder? Are electric cars and buses now going to have a no fire clause built into their warranty? Oh, if it catches fire, that's not under warranty. I don't know. But this has become so common, it's laughable.
Well, it's not laughable if you junked all your diesel buses as soon as you got your new ones, as a lot of these contracts require you to do. You can't just resell them. You actually have to get rid of them and make them unfunctional. And then suddenly you don't have a bus to take your kids to school. Not that you'd want your kids on these buses. It's a stupid idea that only government could force the market to take. There would be no electric buses were it not for the government. There wouldn't be the huge influx of windmills or solar panels were it not for government pushing them. They don't make sense on their own. They can't compete on their own. And of course, there were stories this week that showed that, one electric van manufacturer, another one declared bankruptcy. Wind turbine manufacturer has said it's going to cancel even before the subsidies disappear, just because Trump's in office and he says no more wind turbines. It's like, well, we can't compete on our own. We can't sell our wares in the marketplace without the subsidies and support. So we're just closing the doors, despite the fact that I'm told constantly wind and solar are competitive. They're cheaper than the other forms of energy.
Yeah, we're never going to see a reliable electric vehicle until we get away from lithium-based batteries. It's just that simple.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. All right. Let's move on to we'll keep an eye on that. We do like to highlight how often and how prominently electric vehicles just catch fire spontaneously in the worst places possible. And then that was one of them. So stick around. Maybe this madness will end now in the next 4 years. We shall see. All right. Our second item today comes to us from that commie newspaper, The Guardian. And a little self-indulgence here, but this is a feature story, an expose they did on the Heartland Institute titled Revealed, U.S. Climate Denial Groups Working with European Far-Right Parties. So the lead says that climate science deniers from a U.S.-based think tank have been working with right-wing politicians in Europe to campaign against environmental policies. The Guardian can reveal. The think tank they're talking about is us, the Heartland Institute. And by revealed, they mean that stuff that you can find on the Heartland Institute website, things we put out in emails to the public and to the media, but they're a bunch of clowns, so they call that being revealed. Anyway, the upshot here is that the story reveals that we now have green ministers of European Parliament, MEPs, fretting, quote, the rise of the Heartland Institute in Europe. Though this part here might be my favorite part. I'm just going to read from it. Kenneth Haar from the Corporate Europe Observatory added, quote, it is really bad news to see the Heartland Institute moving to Europe. At this point in time, we should be scared that we will see a revival of grotesque climate denialism. Their presence in Brussels and European politics is bad news. The coming years were looking difficult enough with corporate lobby groups pushing successfully to roll back climate policies. The Heartland Institute is likely to become one of the helping hands to create a close personal alliance between conservatives and the far right that will be very destructive. Well, we can only hope so. I joked earlier this week with Lois Perry, who is the executive director of Heartland UK/Europe, that we should send the authors of this piece in The Guardian a gift basket. Well, she did. So wherever you are, and if you're watching today, Helena Horton, Sam Bright, and Claire Carlisle, I hope you're enjoying the gift basket that was sent to the Guardian's newsroom in London this week. Guys, to me, this shows that we are winning. We are winning, and they are running literally scared from climate realism.
I like how they tried to portray this as some breaking news from investigative journalism, that they discovered something that they hadn't been writing about, by the way, for 3 weeks since we launched Heartland UK Europe back in mid-December.
Right.
They've already had articles on it. The Telegraph ran articles on it. The Sun ran articles. Multiple articles have been running on this. And as you say, we've been putting it out. We haven't been hiding our light under a bushel on this matter anywhere. We're talking about it to anyone who asks us a question. But they revealed something. Boy, the Guardian is on top of things. That's all I can say. They're on top of the fact that, climate realism works in the U.S. and increasingly it looks like it might work in Europe. They might get it. They might understand that they're destroying their economy. They're putting their people in shivering in the winter and molting and sweating in the summer. And they don't like it any more than anyone else would.
No, Myron, you're smiling, but I was thinking you might be jealous. I mean, usually you're the biggest climate criminal I know, you and Malloy. So, maybe next time.
No, you guys are doing great work, and I'm glad that you're entering the fray in the declining continent of Europe and the UK. They are so far in denial of what they've done to their economy and what the cause of it is, namely moving from reliable, affordable energy to squirrels running in little, wheels,
Treadmills.
treadmills. And so anything that you can inject in terms of actual facts and what the reality is it can only help. But they're very far gone. You guys have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, we're ready for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, given the fact that we're now given this sort of nefarious image by the Guardian, I think we need like a pirate flag or something for us.
Yeah.
That we can fly proudly. Put on our cars and so forth.
I'll try and get an eye patch and a tri-corner hat, a black tri-corner hat to wear next time.
We should just do an edit of the Blackbeard flag, the Edward Peach flag with the wine goblet and we should do that. All right.
Yeah.
I'm already Donnie, do it.
Yeah, Donnie, our graphic designer,
Donnie, get on that right now.
Yeah, put Sterling's face on Captain Jack Sparrow, and we're off to the races.
We have a lot of viewers from the UK here on the Climate Realism show, and I wonder what their thoughts are on us invading their space and coming to, I don't know, would this be like a liberation campaign to save them from climate crazies in their own country?
Well, when we announced this, and I wrote the press release, I said that the Heartland Stew was establishing a beachhead in the United Kingdom in Great Britain to then eventually take over Europe, much like U.S. forces in World War II were staged from the UK to liberate all of Europe. So it's coming. You guys gonna have to be patient.
We should call our effort the normalcy invasion. The Normandy invasion.
There you go.
Man, again, there has to be a secret hand signal when you have a good joke coming, Anthony, so we can get the rim shot ready for you. All right. Let's move on. Let's move on to our third item here because we got a lot to talk about. And this one is about the snow in the southern states. There was so much to choose from. And Linnea, I apologize for not grabbing some of your wonderful photos. Maybe we can share one before the show is out. But I did come across this pretty funny ex-post from former West Virginia state legislator Derek Evans. It's a little video he took. He said, Trump has been in office for 1 day and he has already saved us from global warming. And I must say that this is my favorite executive order from Donald Trump in that global warming is canceled. Signs his signature on it, and then that's that.
There you go. Yeah, we had, I think I sent a photo. I don't know if y'all have it. I sent a photo. We actually had the beaches in Galveston covered in snow.
Yeah. I mean, all across Houston, everything. Yeah. So, Anthony, I know you wrote, the companion website to this show is climaterealism.com. And Anthony, of course, this was a pretty big weather event that is being blamed on climate change, that it snowed so much in the South, but it's hardly unprecedented.
Oh, yeah. Well, the media immediately jumped on this and said, oh, the polar vortex is getting deeper and more often, and because of climate change, And I wrote an article on climate realism that completely destroyed these claims. Peer-reviewed research basically says there's no signal whatsoever, and there's contrasting information about the polar vortex. And the only reason that they're talking about this is because it became popularized when we had a big cold outbreak in 2014. And so, the media just jumps on this. And they keep repeating the same thing over and over again. They don't learn anything. They just repeat memes. I mean, they're that dense. And so, yes, the polar vortex is getting worse because of climate change. There's absolutely no evidence in the available science that suggests that this is happening. It's a giant load of crap. I'm sorry. That's what it is.
But the media is schizophrenic on the matter, right? Because every couple of years they publish a new article, often not very originally named, called The End of Snow, where they're telling us, well, we won't see any soon. Children won't know what snow is. You won't see snow. There's no snow for Christmas. And then they get massive snow for Christmas for the first time in a decade. And they say, oh, see, that climate change is really mucking up the weather. It's, they do the same thing with monsoons. Do you have a bad monsoon season? And they'll say, oh, climate change making monsoons worse. Then you have a monsoon season that's not so bad, and they say climate change is taking away the monsoons, which is going to kill people because they won't have water to grow their crops. Every year, it's climate change is doing this, and then the next year, or sometimes the next month, climate change is doing just the opposite. It's climate change is sort of an amazing thing. It's if you were selling it on TV, it'd be Ronco product, and it could do everything. It could open a can. It could it would be a floor cleaner. It would start your car. It'd be amazing.
Hey, Sterling, at least the pocket fisherman works. You can catch a fish with that.
I have one in my garage.
But you know, as Anthony
Ron
is fond of
Popeil.
saying, just because there's a heat wave doesn't mean that we're experiencing, that it's proof of like accelerating warming or something. So too, I don't want people to get too excited jumping on the cold down there and start saying, this is evidence that we're headed into an ice age. Actually, now a cold spell is a cold spell, just the same way that a heat spell is a heat spell. As Anthony likes to point out, it's weather, it's not climate.
Exactly. And it's happened before. New Orleans, for example, they got 10 inches of snow, and the climate crazies are out. Oh no, it's global warming, it's climate change, it's polar vortex. Well, 130 years ago, they had 10 inches of snow, and it was tied by this recent storm. So what was causing the snowmageddon 130 years ago? Was it climate change? No, it's just weather. Weather is a part of a chaotic system of the planet. The planetary weather systems are chaotic, and they will occasionally burst out in large amounts in one area or another. Super dry, super wet, super snowy, super dry again, whatever. It's natural for a chaotic system to do these things, to have these outbreaks. There's nothing abnormal going on.
Right. If carbon dioxide emissions by humans caused, this weather in New Orleans, then what's the excuse in 1895 when they got 10 inches then? These things happen.
I mean, I would say that it is abnormal, but it's abnormal in the scope of like things that can happen. It's abnormal, not impossible, and certainly not unprecedented, which is probably
okay. Unprecedented is the right word here. It's not unprecedented.
Yeah, it's not unprecedented is probably my biggest pet peeve in journalism today. It's probably the most abused word in the English language right now, other than literally.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
Climate change is
exactly.
responsible for all 90% of clickbait headlines, It's amazing the lengths that the media will go to make a headline that looked like disaster is just looming right around the corner next week. And if you don't do something now, like buy an electric car, you're doomed.
I suggest everyone go back and watch the old South Park episode, The Day Before the Day After Tomorrow. Oh my God, it's today! And there's a big shadow coming down the street. Climate change.
Very good. All right. Let's get to our main topic today, lady and gentlemen, and that is Donald Trump making climate policy sane again. Now, the lead essay for Climate Change Weekly this week that Sterling Burnett produces for us is dominated by I think by your count, Sterling, at least 47 executive orders Trump had signed dealing with climate and energy policy. And most of these things were expected, previewed from stories or things that he had done in his first administration. And that's, exiting the Paris Climate Agreement, ending the electric vehicle mandate, no more all-of-government approach to stop climate change, no more restrictions placed on federal infrastructure, buildings, and repairs to ensure sustainability, reversing the offshore oil drilling ban, offices of environmental justice in every federal department, gone, see you later, opening up ANWR, the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, to energy exploration and extraction once again, lifting the ban on liquid natural gas exports, and of course, the coup de grace. Trump instructed the EPA to revisit the endangerment finding.
And
we definitely want to focus on that.
Ending the EV mandate.
Oh yeah, that was the second one I said. You must.
I missed it. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the one that doesn't exist, but it's good that it's there, and it's terrible that he's getting rid of it.
Exactly.
Right. So I want to go around the horn. Like I said, there's 47 of them. I want to start with you, Myron, and I do want to. We can save the discussion of vacating the endangerment finding by EPA. Aside from that one, I assume that's everyone's favorite. What are the ones that stuck out to you that were terrific that Trump did with his EOs?
Oh, well, it's a long list, and as you said, there's a bunch of them, and everybody ought to look at them. They're on whitehouse.gov, the official president's website, and there's a lot of detail there. Some of them are very complicated. Unleashing American dominance and declaring an energy emergency, and they interact in various ways. But I would say, in the short term, he stops offshore wind development. He says you can't use the social cost of CO2 or the social cost of carbon in regulatory rulemaking. So you can't add climate into every policy decision and every permitting decision. He reopens the North Slope of Alaska to oil and gas production and makes a huge number of changes to the way energy is going to be handled. More of it is going to be produced in Alaska by removing a bunch of obstacles, some of which were very surprising. And the funniest thing is, of course, that Trump undid a lot of what Obama did. Biden then undid everything that Trump did. And now Trump has undone every single thing that Biden did, plus a lot more. He's gone much further than the first time. So some of these things I think have problems, but I think by and large, this really is just a revolution. I mean, it's without, and he's going to go to Congress for more changes because the EV mandate is baked into the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. So that's there's a lot more to do, but he's made a pretty good start.
People talk about a president's first 100 days. He did more in the first 100 hours than any president I can imagine doing in 100 days or a month.
Yeah. And a lot more than the first time. The first Trump term, they dragged it out over more than 100 days. So this is much better.
He learned a lot, right?
Yeah.
He came in wanting to drain the swamp his first term, and he was sincere about that. But to be fair, he was not a politician. He'd never been in politics, and he had no idea what the swamp really meant. What was involved in overcoming that bureaucracy? He was a businessman. He was used to being able to say, "You're fired," and it stick.
You're right about that, Sterling. But remember, one thing you haven't said is there were a lot of swamp people in the first Trump administration, including the White House. And it took the president quite a long time to figure that out, that he was getting bad advice from his White House chief of staff and many of his closest advisors in the White House because they were really not with the Trump agenda. Yeah, I think it's different this time.
Yeah, no, I think he learned his lesson. He's a smart guy. He saw the problems that he confronted, and he had good people to work with while he was out of office. It's hard to believe he could get any work done with all the lawsuits and the criminal, the investigations, but he did. And they came in with this massive number of well thought out executive orders. I'm with Myron. I think there are 2 or 3 that won't stick, that will not just be challenged, but be successfully challenged. I think there are some that he just has to have Congress go in and change laws to prevent some of these the really awful things that say Biden did, like his banning offshore oil in all these areas. The law gives the president that authority. It's not clear it gives the next president the authority to withdraw it.
Yeah, and another good thing is that he's learned is, Myron pointed out about these people that were swamp critters that were still in the administration. Well, Trump is cleaning house now. He's basically saying, get out. And he's replacing them with his own people. So he's not going to be in the situation where some of these people are kind of like malingerers, and sabotaging his efforts. So he's getting those saboteurs out, which is a good thing. And he has a much higher chance of success by cleaning house and getting out the potential saboteurs first.
Yeah. Well, Myron, when you were being head of his EPA transition team back in, in 2017, 2016, 2017, as he entered his first term, I was extremely hopeful because I've seen wanted posters by the climate left with your face on them. And so that's the guy I want leading the EPA transition team, somebody who is wanted by the environmental left for crimes against the earth or something, I don't know, or, blasphemy to Gaia. But, I will just confess, you and I, we talk a lot and we have over the years about these things in groups and in person. And I think it's safe to say a lot of people in the climate realist movement, while hopeful, very hopeful when Trump first came into office, were frankly pretty disappointed with what he was able to do, how dedicated he was to enacting climate realism and sensible energy policy. And people have talked about a vibe shift, in the country that the election was reflective of. I feel like there's a vibe shift that's going into everything right now. And I think his vibe has shifted on climate realism, and he's taking it way more seriously, because if you read the language of a lot of these executive orders, they are very precise. They seem designed from the beginning and carefully edited to survive legal challenge.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely, Jim. This time, instead of assembling whatever he could to get ready and then get into the new administration, this time he had his own think tank, the America First Policy Institute. And they have been working on this ever since, for the last 3 years, to make sure that President Trump Mark II is better prepared and that he has a much stronger agenda and a much better team. And so, I think, we're all sorry that he didn't get reelected in 2020. And we wouldn't have had all the damage that the Biden administration and the Democrats in Congress have done. But on the other hand, he's come back with all the energy of a first-term president, but having learned what works and what doesn't work and what he needs to do. So he's got a lot more energy and a lot more direction this time.
Yeah.
There's almost, sorry.
No, you go
I
ahead.
was going to say, there's almost a feeling of like unreality that this has happened, that we got President Trump back and he's like, the first second after he is done with his initial speeches after the inauguration, he's, signing 200 executive orders on things. As one of our commenters said, and I believe as Chris said yesterday, though, as the executive orders are really good to get the ball rolling like right now and to get your foot in the door, but we really need a lot of this stuff to be passed legislatively, and we only have like 2 years to do that, probably, right? Myron, would you?
Well, it's going to be hard to get anything through Congress that the Democrats in the Senate don't like, and they don't like anything that Trump is trying to do because of the cloture rules, the so-called filibuster. But we've got the reconciliation process, which is a way around that. Budget reconciliation only requires a simple majority in the Senate. So Biden got through the so-called Inflation Reduction Act with all the subsidies for EVs and windmills and solar panels and carbon capture and storage and everything else. He got that through budget reconciliation. So the Republicans are going to have to bear down in Congress and get all this stuff undone and then do the new things through budget reconciliation. And, they have a very tight margin in the House. And I think Trump is going to have to be the leader there. He is going to have to tell the Speaker of the House and the House Republicans what to do. And then he's going to have to tell the Senate Republicans what to do. And they better march, because if this agenda isn't successful, the Trump administration isn't going to be successful. And the Republicans are going to get wiped out in the next election. So I think this is very important that he show a lot of leadership in telling the Congress what they have to do.
Yeah, we talked about this other executive orders from the president on yesterday's show In the Tank, seen Thursdays at this very time, 1 p.m. Eastern and 12 p.m. Central Time, where we are here. At least I am here in Chicago. And we wanted to save the climate and energy ones for today's show. But I think it's important to know that, and it's amazing that there were, I think, 200 executive orders at least that he had signed within the first, not even 12 hours of his new administration. He had a signing desk set up at his rally, at his celebration rally, on stage, for crying out loud. That's some WWE style, Vince McMahon stuff there. That was pretty funny. But the important thing is that there needs to be follow through. The idea that a new president can come in and basically change the law of the land with the stroke of a pen for 200 different aspects of our life and policy, it seems crazy to me. And we need a Congress that is going to follow up. We need legislation that is going to make these things actual law that would need to be repealed by a future Congress, instead of being just, flip, every time a new administration comes in.
Yeah, we may not have weather whiplash, but we do have policy whiplash often.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
And I know we want to talk about the endangerment funding, and it may be the most consequential portion of a single bill, of a single order. But I want to talk about one thing before we move on to that, and that is, we talked about Paris, right? So he withdrew us from Paris. That was probably his biggest signature achievement, in the sense of very visible during his first term.
Oops. Sterling is frozen.
Sterling
Sterling
entered the frozone.
We're out in a rule. We're out in a year now. But he went a step farther. It wasn't just getting us out of Paris. He signed an executive order called Putting America First in International Environmental Agreements. And that's a bigger thing, because there's a lot of environmental agreements. And when it comes to the climate agreements, Paris isn't the only one we've signed. Under Clinton, we signed on to something called the Kyoto Protocol. Now it's come and gone. No one met their conditions of the protocol, but we've signed on to a variety of them, saying we're going to do this kind of funding. This gets us out of all of them. Yep. Just getting out of Paris wouldn't have done that. This order, because they were not treaties, none of them since the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was a treaty signed by the Senate. Everything else has just been a president saying, yeah, we're going to send you some money. Yeah. We agree to this language. Well, he's now said, no, we're out of them all. We're not going to follow any of them. We're going to take the money back, and we're not giving you any more. Now, I just assume him not go to another climate conference, him or any of our people waste resources there. But this order, I think, was important.
Absolutely, Sterling. I think it explicitly says we're out of the Paris Climate Treaty and we're out of the international climate finance mechanisms, of which there are several. Now, the U.S. has never put much money into those climate finance mechanisms compared to what was promised, but still we're talking about a whole lot of international UN bureaucracy that we're not going to be part of. I think also it opens the door to getting out of the underlying treaty, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the Rio Treaty of 1992, because it directs the Secretary of State and others to look into what our international environmental commitments are and what ought to be done about them. So it's as you said, it's much deeper than just getting out of the Paris Climate Treaty.
Yep. All right, that's very good point, and that's something we can talk about on this show moving forward for sure, as we keep an eye on these things. Anthony Watts, you shared a couple of links in our private chat here. Maybe with some proof of policy change already.
Well, not quite proof yet, but I would like to see President Trump cut the head off of the climate snake. And the head of the climate snake is NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. These are the guys that started it all. Back in June of 1988, Dr. James Hansen went before Congress on the hottest day of June, which they scheduled in particular to be the hottest day of June. They called the Weather Service ahead of time, said, what's going to be the hottest day over the next couple of weeks? That's when they scheduled the hearing. Then they went in the night before, sabotaged the air conditioning, and opened the windows so that the people were sitting in there sweating for the cameras while they talked about the dangers of global warming. That is the most dishonest piece of policy and science I've ever seen. If your science is so strong, why do you need this stagecraft bullshit? In any event, NASA GISS was going to be on the way out. It was formed as a planetary research group for the Apollo landings, also for potential Mars landings, Venus landings, the whole works. But basically, once the Apollo program got canceled in the 70s, they didn't really have a mission much anymore, and they were languishing. They were in danger of losing funding. And until they came up with, oh no, we're all going to die of climate change unless we do something right now in June of 1988, they basically were, they were just getting scraps of funding. And then all of a sudden, of course, Congress freaks out and says, oh, well, we better throw some money at this. Boom. They threw millions and millions of dollars at NASA guests. And these guys basically set the tone for all of the other climate alarmism down the pike. Does NASA guests have to exist today? No. And I want to tell you why. Let's go to the next page. They have, of course, their GIST temp graph, which is the one that is the highest sloping one out of all of them. It is sloping high and has a higher magnitude because they're still using a base period of data from 1950 to 1980. They refuse to change it. Why? Well, if they changed it like everybody else does, like UAH, RSS, all these other groups, it would go down a little bit. It wouldn't be quite as dramatic. They're keeping that up there for stagecraft again. But here's the thing. NASA GIST doesn't even gather their own data. They get all of their data collected by NOAA from the GHCN network around the globe. It gets collected in Asheville, North Carolina. NASA GIST takes that raw data, applies their own secret sauce, and comes up with the worst case scenario graphics for increasing temperature. So the need for having a global temperature, which isn't all that much important anyway, isn't even necessary with NASA GIST. They're just a hanger-on. They make their own stuff with their own secret sauce. My advice to President Trump, get rid of them. They are the head of the snake. Now, I want to go to one other thing, and that is NOAA, the NCEI. These guys talk about billion-dollar disasters. This is their billion-dollar disaster page. Now, these guys are also doing something very unscrupulous. They're calculating billion-dollar weather and climate disasters without taking into account, the gross domestic product, inflation, and all these other things. They're using raw, unadjusted data, and which is funny because they're all big about adjusted data when it comes to temperature, but when it comes to calculating billion-dollar weather and climate disasters, well, no, we're not going to look at any of this other GDP stuff and percentages of GDP and all this other thing. Dr. Roger Pielke Jr. has been a strong advocate for saying this is wrong. It's wrong because it gives a false picture of what we really have in terms of disasters. My advice to President Trump, shut these guys down. All right, rant over.
Rant over. Anthony Rant. That's usually my gig.
Excellent.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, and so we'll keep an eye on that. Actually, as you were going through that, Anthony, I remembered that in the first Trump administration, I think very quickly, within a few days, a lot of the climate alarmist narrative pages and stuff from EPA and other places were taken down. We'll have to. I didn't even think to look to see if that alarmist BS was taken off of the government sites or not, but we'll check it out for you. But before we get to Q&A, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the endangerment finding, because this really is, in a lot of ways, kind of the holy grail. It's the linchpin of the regulatory state when it comes to carbon dioxide. And in today's Climate Change Weekly from Sterling Burnett, he cites Section 6F of one of Trump's climate executive orders. And it says, quote, within 30 days of the date of this order, so that clock is already ticking, the administrator of the EPA, in collaboration with the heads of any other relevant agencies, shall submit joint recommendations to the director of the Office of Management and Budget on the legality and continuing applicability of the administrator's findings, quote, endangerment and cause, or contribute findings for greenhouse gases under Section 202A of the Clean Air Act, Final Rule 74, blah, 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 blah. And that was from December of 2009. So this, I'll leave it to you guys to tell me if my assumption is correct, but this does read to me that the endangerment finding that EPA has depended upon to regulate every molecule of carbon dioxide emitted by human activity is itself now endangered.
Well, Sterling, Jim, let's go back a little and explain what endangerment means. Massachusetts, in the Supreme Court in Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007, ruled that yes, the EPA did have authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate CO2 emissions from vehicles, and there was an implication from stationary sources like power plants, coal and gas power plants, if certain conditions were met. They didn't say you have to regulate it. They said you have to look at it under the law and see if CO2 qualifies as a pollutant and if you have the tools in the Clean Air Act to regulate it. So the Bush administration took a pass on doing anything either one way or the other. The Obama administration in 2009 made the endangerment finding, and that's what started all these efforts to regulate cars, trucks, coal plants, gas plants, and other things to reduce CO2 emissions. Well, the fact is that the Clean Air Act is not designed to regulate CO2. It's designed to regulate air pollutants. And so it's a total mess. It has a huge cost. It's pointless. But even if you don't think it's pointless, even if you believe that we should be reducing CO2 emissions, this can't possibly be the way to do it. And so I think what you said about the administrator of the EPA in consultation is ordered within 30 days to look into this. I think they've got it ready to go. My guess is that they already have the repeal or the revocation of the endangerment finding ready to publish in the Federal Register. That's my guess. So I think we're going to see some. I think Trump wants to act much more quickly this time than he did last time. He learned a lesson, which is it takes a long time to undo and redo regulations, and he's not going to mess around. So I think it's all ready to be published.
Yeah, Lee Zeldin was asked about that in his hearing for confirmation. He was pressed by, I believe it was Senator Markey, or maybe it was Angus King, can't remember. No, yeah, whatever. He was pressed on that question though. It's like, basically he was asked, do you believe in the endangerment finding and that you have to enforce it? And he goes, it says we may. Right. And so he was hinting that
what he said
that was in trouble.
Markey said that you have to, you're obligated to. And he said, no, we are authorized to.
Right. Huge difference. So yeah, so he signaled this was coming. And again, that was one of the top agenda items I know of you guys at EPA Transition was to tackle that idea. And it was basically ignored. It was just not touched. They figured what they did was enough. And what we learned of the last 4 years in the interregnum between the two Trump administrations is that it was necessary to do that you had to go as far as he's going now and maybe even farther in order to, as Anthony put it, cut the head off the snake or strangle this whole thing and get back to having science-based policy, not alarmist, BS fake science-based policy.
Yeah, that's right. I have a little inside knowledge on the first term. The administrator was Scott Pruitt, who had come from the Oklahoma attorney. He was the Oklahoma Attorney General before he was appointed. And he was very tied into the Republican Attorneys General Association and also the Federalist Society. And these are all good conservative lawyers, but he asked the wrong people, his contacts through the Federalist Society. He asked the wrong people whether he should or needed to take on the endangerment finding. And he was told, no, it's not necessary in any way. It's way too much work. And so I think you can see that the thinking has changed and that there's a lot more ambition and a lot more energy and a lot more fight in President Trump and the team that he's putting together.
That is fantastic news. We seem to have lost Anthony Watts here. Hopefully he'll come back, probably having some technical difficulties. That's why it's nice to have so many people on the show at once. So it's good to cover our bases. I think unless I think we covered that pretty well. We will keep an eye on this for sure. We will probably have updates on this as we go along. Sterling, one last word before we get to Q&A?
Yeah, one last thing about why the endangerment finding is so important. One little rule, right? One little rule. but it serves as the foundation for every regulation in every department. The Clean Power Plan, the EV mandates, the social cost of carbon, everything that's been built, the whole edifice of climate policy and rules and regulations depend upon carbon dioxide being considered an endangerment under the EPA. So if it goes, there's no justification any longer for any of the other things built upon it.
Yeah, kicks the legs out from under it, and then it's not getting back up. So that's pretty big. So we will keep an eye on that. We'll be reporting on this show. So stay tuned. Come back every Friday where we will talk about this. Well, let's take some of your questions and comments from the always lively chat here. Linnea, please take it away.
You got it. All right. Well, first, once again, as usual, we have a very funny audience. We have this great comment from Kite Man Music, which I would like to highlight. Hello, Kite Man, who says, with the arrival of Trump back again, does this mean we have reached a tipping point with the fake climate change agenda? This may be one of the tipping points that actually are real.
Well, it's a golden age. We've entered a golden age. I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but the president is determined to make this more than a tipping point. This time he doesn't want to make it possible to go back to the rubbish pursued during 12 out of the last 16 years.
Yeah, we've got we're exiting the winter of our discontent, and it's my hope. We discussed earlier. It's nice that Trump is doing this. It's clearly they thought it through, and it's well thought through. They have a series of things that build upon each other, but some of this stuff needs congressional action. He needs to be able to sign stuff, whether they are Congressional Review Act things, and he can sign some of those now that Congress will pass some for rules that were enacted since August. But they need to change some laws fundamentally. They need to change the NEPA law. They need to change the Antiquities Act. They need to change wetlands law. And they need to change some of this other climate stuff. So he needs some help. Let's hope that Congress gets the message that he is the leader of the party and they should follow his standard.
It's only been 100 hours, Sterling. Just calm down. Just have some patience. It'll all happen.
Right. But, I would definitely like to see more repeals than new bills go through. I think repeals would do a lot more for us than new legislation.
I think he said something like, I'm going to get rid of 10 regulations for every new regulation. Last time it was like 3. But I'd like to see 10 laws gone for every law enacted.
All right. So we have this good question from Chris Shattuck, who says, can Trump impose sanity upon California? My take, and it looks like Anthony's take too, is no, but he can make it so that California's insane disease does not infect other states quite as badly as it currently does.
Well, that's right. One of the executive orders says that they have to review everything, and they have to get rid of the EV mandate. And so, what is the worst part of the leading edge of the EV mandate is the California waiver. And I don't want to get technical, but what was done first under the Obama administration and then redone under Biden was to grant California the authority to make vehicle policy. What kind of cars and trucks can people buy, to make California's policy the national policy? So this is sort of a kind of perversion of federalism. We want the states to have a lot of authority to decide how they want to run things, but we don't want one state to be able to control how all the other states do things. That's federal policy. That's not state policy. And so revoking the California waiver is going to take some time. It's going to take some legal action, and it will be litigated. There will be people, California and all their allies in the climate environmentalist movement will defend it. But until the California waiver is revoked, California is essentially running the auto industry, and that cannot persist.
Yep.
Well, I've got a different way of getting rid of it. Let's all push Clexit. California exits from the United States. Several they actually have to show an ID to come into the rest of the United States.
Yeah.
Sterling, I love California, and it's got more going for it than any other place in the world, and it's just been politically ruined. We can't give up on it. You know, politics is shifting sands, as we found it dramatically in the last few decades, and so don't give up on California. Sanity, when things get bad enough, sanity will set in, and I think these fires in Los Angeles are really bad, and that's already causing some very wealthy people in LA to start rethinking their political views.
I hope you're right, Myron. I hope your optimism is warranted, but I was long a person who believed reality would make politicians change their mind about things. About 15, 18 years ago, I was talking about coal-fired power plants and how coal, they need baseload power. You have to have. You won't be closing these coal plants. They'll come to their senses on wind and solar. And man, was I wrong. Reality slapped them in the face, and they turned the other cheek, and they said, we don't care. We're going to keep building wind. We're going to keep building solar, and we're going to keep closing coal. And the grid is in danger.
Kick in the butt has happened in California, though.
I'm not just talking about California. I'm talking about nationwide.
Yeah, but Sterling, look, the problem is that the people who operate the grid are much too clever, and we should have had catastrophic blackouts all around the country for years now. That will change people's mind, and it is coming unless the Trump policies are successful. So. And I don't think there's enough reliance in the Trump policies so far on the grid. There's too much on oil and gas production and not enough on the power plants. But I hope they will turn. I hope Doug Burgum, as the national energy czar, will turn his attention to the grid and what needs to be done to save it, because the grid operators are very clever at keeping it up and running. But we've reached the point now that people are going to be without electricity for long periods and quite frequently. And I don't think at some point, the American people are not going to take it.
I would point out, Sterling, you're talking about that politicians don't pay attention to the reality. That's mostly true. But when it really comes down to the nitty gritty, it's happened in California. And a gruesome Newsom actually changed his policy because they were going to shut down the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And then when everyone said, hey, look, this thing is providing, such a big chunk of California's baseload electricity. If you shut that thing off, we're toast. And he's like, oh, well, in 1922, he reversed his position on it. Now they're letting that thing stay open. So
they rescinded their rules on trucks, large vehicles for electrification. But I think it's tinkering around the edges. I'm sitting here. I'm in Texas. This is not a blue state. Except
for Austin.
Except for Austin. But Austin does not run the state. And yet 200 people died in the middle of winter 3 short years ago because the power system did fail. And a lot of bad decisions were made by the regulators as to how to manage the power system. But the largest reason for the failure was the reliance on wind and solar. And we had a legislature that came in vowing to fix the problem and didn't. And so now every day this week, I'm getting warnings that the power system might fail. Now, there's no reason. This is Texas. We have coal, and we had coal plants until we closed them. We have lots of natural gas here. There's no justification for us to continue down the path of wind and solar, but they haven't halted it. And people died. It's not esoteric for us.
It's much worse in Texas than you're making out. And it's all due to starting with Governor George W. Bush in 1999 and the influence of Ken Lay of Enron, and the fact that the utilities and the legislature are now controlled by wind and solar, because Texas is now the largest producer of both wind and solar. And you guys are the leading edge of disaster in terms of electric reliability. It's because you have allowed big money from wind and solar to essentially buy the state legislature that you're in this fix. And I don't, again, you may have to have some more blackouts. I hope they're in the summer, not in the winter, because a lot more people die when it's cold.
Yeah. All right, Linnea, let's get some more questions in here. So we're running short on time.
Our answer period there went so long. I forgot who asked that last question. I was going to type in the chat saying thanks a lot for that question that led to the whole discussion. I think it was Chris Shattuck who asked if California is going to be crazy forever. Okay, let's see. I have a couple of science questions that I want to pitch to Anthony, and I want to preface it by saying right off the bat that this is it's an area that's up for debate, I think. And so while Heartland does have studies or rather does platform people who take this position, not everyone of good will on the climate issue does. So the question is, this person made comments about how we're going to enter into a grand solar minimum and we're going to have a new ice age, that kind of commentary, or at least a cooling period. He asks, has Heartland done studies on this? And I think someone else also asked, let's see, it was a similar kind of a question regarding, okay. From our friend Albert, who says, on the Tom Nelson podcast, people like Willie Soon and Will Happer all say by 2031, we will be in a significant cooling period. So what does the panel think about that? And Anthony, I'd like to pitch it to you because these are our friends. I mean, we love Willie Soon and Will Happer. They come to our climate conferences. We platform their research. But there is a difference of opinion in this area. And I want to emphasize to the audience before we get your answer that if there's significant disagreement, it doesn't mean that you are like in opposition to them or there's like some kind of contention or something. There's not. It's that there's legitimate scientific disagreement in these areas that are not like corrupt,
I want to, before Anthony answers the question about the science, I want to say one thing, because the first question was, have we published anything on this? And so I've been here for, I think 9 years now. And we republished one book that was out of Europe by Verenholt on the sun, but we haven't published other things on the grand solar minimum. We haven't published studies or anything. We republished one book. It was called the something sun. Yeah. And that was a few years ago, but it was republished. And but that's the only thing I won't say we haven't published stories or op-eds, but we haven't published another study. I'll leave it to Anthony now. I just wanted to answer that. I didn't know if he'd know that.
Okay, so on the question of Willie Soon and Will Happer say it'll be cooling by 2031, well, I'm going to refer to Yogi Berra. It's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. And I think that falls into that category. I mean, it could go either way. The bottom line is that I've looked at solar a lot. I used to be a big proponent of the idea that sunspot numbers indicated cooling periods and so forth. But my resident amateur scientist, Willis Etchenbach, has done several publications on whatsupwiththat.com about the correlation or the lack of correlation between sunspots and cooling weather around the planet. And he's done some very, very, very robust analysis of this stuff. And from my perspective, there is not a clear connection between sunspot numbers and cooling or warming of the planet. There are some false starts to some of this. Way back when we started the famous Maunder minimum, we also had some volcanic eruptions that started that around that time. And then we had the famous year without a summer. And so the volcanic eruptions cooled and obscured the skies. And so it's possible that sunspot numbers went down naturally, but were also, and the drop in numbers was enhanced by the fact that some astronomers couldn't see them anymore due to the haze and so forth. There's that possibility. But the bottom line is that every time we go and look for a correct statistical correlation between sunspot numbers and global climate change, it just does not hold up. Now, that's not to say that the sun has no effect on climate. By far, that is not what we're saying. The sun does fluctuate in its output of of total solar irradiance, TSI. And so there is fluctuation involved there. But we've also got other mechanisms going on. You know, we've got global sulfates, we've got clouds, got all kinds of things going on the Earth itself, which can actually factor larger. And then, of course, we've got the crazy thing with the temperature stations where, you know, we're getting warmer and warmer because the temperature stations are next to heat sinks and heat sources. So all of this figures in. Whether we're going to cool, you know, around 2031, it's anybody's guess.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough. So that
Yeah.
that works for me. I hope the audience appreciates it.
Just one
Again,
last thing, just quick thing. The book is The Neglected Son by Fritz Fahrenhold and
I think
Sebastian Leuning, and we've discussed. Yeah, you probably have a copy there, Linnea.
I sent a link to the page.
This one.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was 2015. That was the year I came on board, I believe. So
yeah, Heartland has probably distributed 1,000, maybe several thousand copies of that book around the world to people, and we've always had it at our climate conferences. So yeah,
It's a good one. It's very interesting. And it's not too bad of a read either for people who aren't super well educated in some of the science they're talking about. It's very accessible as well. Let's see. We can answer this question really fast from Above Us Only Sky. Wasn't Chicago once under 3,000 feet of ice? Yes, and then some. It was more than 3,000 feet of ice on top of the Chicagoland area. Let's hope that never ever happens in anybody's lifetime. That would be that would be catastrophic climate change. I'll tell you that.
I would say that if an ice age occurs naturally through changes in precession or other things about Earth's orbit or other factors, there's not one damn thing we can do to stop it.
If we could get all the right politicians there at the same time, I'd almost be willing to sacrifice.
Put them all on ice.
Instant glaciation. Okay, you'd have to get it'd be like a Batman villain, like Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze,
Ray.
yeah. There you go.
What a good movie, Batman and Robin. And I say that with sincerity, even though it's famously one of the worst. I love it. Okay, from Christine Laurel. She asks, how hard will it be for the new administration and Congress to untangle all the horrible energy policies from the last 4 years? Myron, I'll pitch it to you.
Well, it's a lot of work. And unfortunately, I'm not really that fond of masses of lawyers, but it takes a lot of really smart regulatory lawyers because undoing regulations and then redoing them, you have to go through the processes of the Administrative Procedures Act. And there's a lot of obstacles, including public comment periods, and then once the rule goes final, lawsuits. And so there will be a lot of lawsuits, and the left has an awful lot of lawyers and a lot of very clever lawyers. And I think just to say something encouraging, Trump's pick for EPA administrator, the head regulator of all this, is Lee Zeldin. And Lee Zeldin does not have experience in the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, Superfund, and so on. But he is a very sharp lawyer. He's a regulatory lawyer. He's very energetic, and he's very enthusiastic about deregulating. So I think starting with the top at the EPA, they're going to assemble a very strong team. And also at the Department of Justice, we haven't heard who's going to be the Assistant Attorney General for Energy and Natural Resources. I hope they can't get anybody as good as last time, Jeff Clark. But last time, Jeff Clark didn't get confirmed until 2018 in the fall. It took a year and a half. He was so controversial. So I hope that there's going to be a really strong team to go through all the regulatory legal hoops.
All right, thank you. Let's see. We have a lot of questions that I starred. Some of them that we will probably not be able to get to, but because we're already a little bit over time, but I want to get to a good chunk of these. So I'm trying to pick and choose which ones follow each other the best. Here's one from Donald, who says, what do you think about Trump's statements at Davos suggesting the National Energy Emergency Declaration was done to facilitate the energy production needed for the Stargate AI infrastructure plan? Likewise, there's another question here that kind of relates to this. which says, when will slowing the energy hogs happen? Can we allow tenfold electricity demand by data tech, AI, and EV manufacturing and Bitcoin mining? Can we stop these hogs? Conservation used to be a word. And to that, I would say, I don't think the Bitcoin mining thing is so much of an energy hog anymore. I think that's kind of died off. Andy would know better than me, but I don't think that's quite as big of a demand, but the AI stuff definitely is a big energy demand. So I pitch it to anyone on the panel that wants to weigh in on those.
I'll just say that on yesterday's In the Tank podcast, which you can find on our YouTube channel, we did cover this on that program. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, and I would add, I was at an all-day seminar last week on grid reliability and whether AI data centers are going to be another hit on grid reliability. And the answer is, well, yeah, sort of, but mostly not. And the reason is because the big tech companies do not have the patience to wait for utilities to 2 or 3 years to get the permits to build a power plant, and then 2 or 3 more years to build it. They are very impatient and they have a lot of money, and they're going to build their own power plants to run their own data centers. And these power plants will not be on the grid. And so I think the answer is data centers are not going to threaten the grid, but the grid is in such deep disrepair because of the closure of coal-fired power plants and the building of wind and solar that, thank God that AI isn't going to add very much to that. But there's a lot of work to do anyway.
It may be a blessing. We debated this a while ago when we had a show just after Microsoft said they were going to restart the nuclear plant with Constellation 3 Mile Island, and whether we liked the idea of AI getting their own power. And I said at the time, and I still believe it, look, if they're no longer drawing power from the grid, that benefits us. It benefits average folks. But B, they should also no longer be lobbying for certain types of energy production and grid. No, you take care of yourself. The rest of the country will take care of ourselves. And we're going to do what you did, which is build baseline reliable power.
Yeah. Once they have to build their own, they're going to build gas turbines, and nuclear is a long ways away, except for reopening this one plant. But I want to point out, reopening an existing plant, which is a lot cheaper than building a new one, Microsoft is still going to pay more than twice the going rate for electricity, and they're willing to do that.
Right.
Yeah, we've brought it up a few times that we're a little bit worried about a tiered electricity system where big tech gets to have their own private nuclear and gas and maybe even coal in some cases. There's a coal plant in, I believe, Iowa that was allowed to remain open longer beyond when it was supposed to be shut down because Kansas. Okay, well, Kansas. I was on the right side of the Mississippi anyway. Doesn't narrow it down too well, but I knew it was something like that. But they're being permitted to keep that power plant open because of a data center that's going into that area. So we're keeping our eye on that. But if they did stop petitioning, and lobbying for unreliable energy for the rest of us, that would be fine. I can't see anything wrong with someone having their own personal power plant. Let's see. This is a question from one of our viewers on Rumble, BSCI Peony. I'm not even going to try. Sorry, friend. Can the EPA submit endangerment evidence based on the flawed models?
Well, that's all they've ever done.
That's what they do. Yeah. That's what they did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they do. We're hoping that the new regime under Lee Zeldin will say, hey, we're only going to take actual climate science, not fantasy, and not models. You can get any answer you want out of a model.
When they did the endangerment finding initially, they did two things. They looked at models, and they looked at the IPCC summary for policymakers, and they said this is the gold standard, and they say it's a danger, and the models say it's a danger, so it's a danger.
Yeah.
Okay. Riss Reed asks, how can we make sure repealing the Inflation Reduction Act gets through reconciliation?
Well, support all the groups that are pushing for it, like the Heartland Institute. You know,
Oh, good point.
we've been talking about this ever since the Inflation Reduction Act got passed through reconciliation. Not a single Republican senator voted for it, which is surprising considering where some Republican senators are. And then the next year, every Republican in the House voted to repeal it. So there's very strong support, and now all of the industry lobbyists who get handouts, and that includes the American Petroleum Institute, not just wind and solar, they are all going up to the Hill and telling the Republicans, oh no, we can't repeal the whole thing. We just need to make surgical cuts and be really sensible and just take out the bad stuff. Well, everybody who's getting a handout thinks that what they're getting is good. So it's some other guy's handout that's bad. So we have to unite, and we need to push the Republicans, and Trump has to lead it. But groups like Heartland and others in the coalition, the Cooler Heads Coalition, need to be pushing to say the whole thing has to go, and it will save so much money that can then be used to pay for the tax cuts. So this is a huge issue, and I'm glad it was brought up. I mean, it's a colossal issue, and it's going to be a colossal fight.
Yep. Thank you. Here's a good question from Chris Nisbet, who says, will any of these executive orders have any impact on state-based policies like the New York drive to destroy their electricity grid and bans on gas stoves in buildings, or can they continue regardless? Anybody?
Who wants to answer? This is going to be a big fight. I mean, some things, if you look at the executive orders, some things are already, the states are already being pushed, or they're going to try to push them. And in the executive order that says that declaring an energy emergency, it particularly calls out problems on the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington, and in the Northeast, New York and New England, and Alaska. And it says there are going to be attempts to break the three governors on the West Coast, the way they have stopped coal ports being built to ship coal from Wyoming, and also pipelines. New York has stopped pipelines that New England wants, gas pipelines, so that they don't have to import LNG from Russia. And so I think there's going to be a concerted effort to do whatever is possible. But let's face it, and I think I agree with this, the states have a lot of authority on their own, and we shouldn't trample it, but we shouldn't let them try to get away with making national policy.
It could be the case where you have a sort of a energy apartheid in the United States to some extent.
We already have this.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, where you get some real reforms pretty quick, you get pipelines built in some places and not in others, and not because, like I said, Trump's executive order energy emergency should reduce some of that, but in the end, it's not like some of these states where their executives, their AGs, their environment heads, their heads live firmly in the sand, or their pocketbooks live firmly in the pocket of green energy, politically connected green energy elites. They're not going down quietly for these rules. They're going to keep fighting. Some states may have to withdraw from, for instance, Reggie, to get more sanity in their states. So that they're not doing this trading stuff, which only harms them.
Some states have already announced that they will keep the United States' commitments under the Paris Climate Treaty to reduce CO2 emissions. They will keep them in their state. I think.
Let me ask you about that, Myron, because I've never understood how a state or a city could do that, because it's very clear that only the United States may be party to international agreements. That it's not just interstate commerce that's controlled by Congress, supposedly, but it's international agreements. And so how can a state say, no, we're going to do what the UN wants, not what the United States government wants? I've never understood that.
Well, they're not saying that they're a party to the treaty. They're just saying that the United States under the Biden administration and the Obama administration made commitments to cut U.S. emissions, and that California's share is X percent, and they will keep the commitment to cut by that percentage. That would be something that they would adopt through legislation or regulation. It's not that they're a part of the treaty. However, RGGI, I'm glad you mentioned RGGI. California is, and maybe Washington and maybe Oregon are part of an emissions trading scheme with certain Canadian provinces. And that seems to be clearly unconstitutional because you can't make these kinds of compacts without the approval of Congress. And so the first Trump administration, Jeff Clark and John Brightbill sued in court to stop this, to having a deal with Quebec or Ontario. And they lost the first round, and then they went out of office. And so the case was lost. But this needs to be refought. It's very important that states can't mess around internationally.
Yes. Appreciate that, Myron. And yeah, I mean, there's so much that we went over on this show. There's going to be so much more to go over in the future as the Trump administration. It feels like it's already been in place for months and not hours. It's amazing how much has been done. You get a second chance, and he is taking advantage of it in every single way. Right before we go here, because you can hear the music as we're leaving, I wanted to show some funny stuff that we didn't quite get to earlier in the show. This meme has been going around with us and our climate realist friends. If you're cold, they're cold. Bring them inside. And the image of a alligator in the snow. It's pretty funny. And we mentioned at the beginning of the show that Linnea Lueken was enjoying herself with a pipe at a inaugural ball in DC. So the story is true. Look how much fun that was. I really wish I did not miss it. And she also mentioned her poor chickens, and they are alive. Here they are, enjoying themselves in the snow. Chickens are pretty tough birds, and they will live through this. That is for sure. I want to thank, as we wrap up here, I want to thank Myron Ebell from American Lands Council and formerly of CEI, one of the #1 climate criminals on Earth. Hopefully you will remain out of climate jail, and you can come back on the show in the future. Appreciate that. Thank you, Sterling Burnett. Thank you, Linnea Lueken. Thank you, Anthony Watts, who had to bug out a little early. And thank you very much to our producer, Andy Singer, in the background. Always visit climaterealism.com. Visit climateataglance.com. Go to whatsupwiththat.com, and always go to heartland.org, where you can subscribe to get the Climate Change Weekly newsletter. Thank you all in the chat and everyone watching and listening today. Bye-bye.